So Sakio Bika retains his WBC super middleweight title with a draw against Anthony Dirrell. This was a pretty fun fight. Bika does what he does, man. He's a very crude fighter. Been around for years and years and years. He's fought a who's who of the super middleweight division. Very strong guy. In terms of physical strength, you know, probably the physically strongest guy in the super middleweight division. Although Andre Ward himself is very physically strong. It's between him and Ward in terms of who's the physically strongest. But, you know, Sakio Bika is certainly a beast in terms of physical strength. And he has very little in terms of boxing skill or technique or anything like that, despite the fact he's very experienced. And, you know, this was a typical Bika fight, really, against Anthony Dirrell. Typical Bika fight. You know, Bika going in there, wild swings, pushing the opponent back to the ropes, clubbing them and stuff like that. You know, caveman tactics. And early in the fight, I thought the first half of the fight, Dirrell was getting the better of it, even though he was finding it rough in there. You know, Bika's a very physical, rough guy to fight. Dirrell was finding it rough in there, but he was landing the clean shots. He hurt Bika several times. And, you know, he obviously dropped Bika in one of the rounds in the first half of the fight. And don't get it twisted. There was early on rounds that Bika won as well. But for the most part, in the first half of the fight, it was more about Anthony Dirrell. But in the second half of the fight, Bika really took over for me. And he was out hustling Dirrell. Dirrell just wasn't doing enough work. He was allowing himself to get pinned on the ropes. And he wasn't throwing enough back. There was times when Bika was really teeing off on the ropes. And he was getting through with some of those wide, you know, looping, sloppy shots that came all the way from Australia and Cameroon and shit like that. And it was landing on Anthony Dirrell's face. Some of them was penetrating the guard. And Bika was also going well to the body and stuff like that. So it ended up in a draw after a pretty entertaining contest. Typical Bika. Pretty entertaining. Ended up in a draw. I think a draw, I don't think you can really argue with a draw. You know, Anthony Dirrell went off crying and screaming and, you know, acting like it was some massive robbery. It certainly wasn't a robbery. You know, anyone that thinks this fight was a robbery is obviously very biased. It definitely wasn't a robbery. And I've got no affiliation and no allegiance to either fighter, right? I've never been a massive Bika fan or a massive Anthony Dirrell fan, so I couldn't give a shit either way who won the fight, right? But I'm just here to tell you, as a neutral observer, there was no robbery here. Yeah, this fight was, if you thought that Anthony Dirrell won it by a couple rounds, yeah, that's fair enough. If you thought that Bika won it by a couple rounds, fair enough. If you thought the fight was a draw, fair enough. It was one of them kind of fights. I thought a draw was definitely a fair result. Yeah, it was definitely a fair result. I don't know what Anthony Dirrell is crying and screaming about. He needs to cry and scream about his own performance, you know, because there's certain things he did wrong in there, allowing himself to get pinned on the ropes, and, you know, Bika was whacking him with body shots and, you know, hitting him in the head with them big wide haymakers and whatnot. Why didn't Dirrell get off the ropes, man? You know, why didn't he use more lateral movement? Why was he just allowing himself to get pinned like that? You know, these are mistakes that he made, which cost him some rounds, you know. So rather than just screaming about the decision, he needs to scream about his own performance and what he could have done better. Bika apparently has got no interest in giving Dirrell a rematch. Dirrell was the mandatory. Bika, obviously, this is the first time he's become a world champion. So he's going to try and milk that belt for as much money as he can make from it. I'd heard a long time ago, I think it was earlier this year or last year, that Bika's management were trying to make Bika against Carl Froch. And I think that's a good fight for Bika. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure who wins that fight. I'm not sure who wins Bika Carl Froch. I'm going to make a video about Carl Froch, actually, to respond to a lot of the delusional Carl Froch fans, because there's a lot of Froch fans who are incredibly just as deluded as Froch is himself, if not more so. And the truth is that Carl Froch is not much higher up in terms of levels than Sakio Bika. Yeah, if you look at Sakio Bika's career, you know, he's fought Andre Ward, he's fought Lucian Bute, he's fought Joe Calzaghe. He's won the Contender. He's now become a world champion against a Dirrell. You know, he's fought one of the Dirrell brothers just as Froch has and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, they've got similar careers. Bika's also fought a who's who of the super middleweight division just as Froch has. Obviously, Froch has done a bit better than Bika for the most part. But in other fights, Bika's done better than Froch against some of his common opponents. So I would say Froch is slightly above Bika in terms of levels, but not that much higher than Bika. Right, that's the kind of level Froch is at. So Froch against Bika, I don't know who wins that fight. Honestly, I think it's a good fight. I don't know who wins it. Froch is a bit more skilled than Bika, but Bika's so strong, it's ridiculous. You know, he's so rough and tough and rugged, and he can just take you out of your, take you out of your boxing, man. I mean, you saw it there with Anthony Dirrell, how hard he found it to keep his boxing together under that type of wild caveman-like onslaught from Bika. You know, it's it's very hard to trying to keep your boxing together when someone that's physically strong is just insisting that that you're gonna have a street fight rather than a boxing match. They insist on it. So I don't know. I don't know who wins Bika against Froch, man. I don't know who wins that fight. And in fact, going into this fight here with Anthony Dirrell against Sakio Bika, I had a quick look at the odds going into the fight because I was thinking of putting some money down on this fight, depending on what the odds was. And there was some odds on a draw because obviously this fight ended in a draw. And the odds on a draw for this fight, and I was thinking, you know what, those odds for the draw are crazy. I should put some money down on that. The odds for the draw for Bika against Dirrell was something like 30 to 1. Right? So anyone that actually did put money in the draw, down on the draw for Bika Dirrell, yeah, I congratulate you, man, because that was a great bet. You know what I mean? So anyway, drop your comments below. Let me know how you felt about this fight. Where do you think both fighters go from here? Did you think a draw was a fair result? Yeah, drop your comments below. This is Hatman. I'm out.